Hi, how you doing today? Chef Hal here, and this is Cooking with Hal. Alright everybody, so what we're going to do today to start is we're going to make some garlic breadcrumbs. So what I have here is I have some fresh bread, some garlic, and some olive oil. Now we're going to get our fresh bread, and we're going to slice everything into a medium dice. So the reason we do this is when we cook it, we want it to all be uniform so that it cooks at even distribution, because the whole point is you want nice caramelization on all sides of the breadcrumb. So when we grind them, there's no moisture left in it. So since we're using fresh bread instead of old bread, there's still moisture in the bread. So we want to make sure to get all of that out. And we want to make sure when we're slicing, right, we have to keep our fingers tucked back and make sure you use a rocking motion. That is the key, because you always want to make sure that you're being safe and using the knife properly. Now we're going to place our bread into our mixing bowl so that we can season and oil our bread before we saute it. All right, so the next ingredient we're going to be working with is our garlic. So how to make sure that you get fresh garlic is to make sure that you squeeze the top, and if it's firm, that's how you know you have fresh cloves. So now we're going to pull our cloves off our head, and we're going to cut off the core. First, you're going to cut the core off, and then what you're going to do is you're going to turn it around, and you're going to cut off the other end. And we're going to smash it, and that's actually going to help release it, so it makes it a lot easier to get your garlic out of the skin. So what you do is make sure you put the knife blade away from you when you're smashing, and you want to use the butt of your hand so you can get a nice quick smash. And you only don't want to do it hard, just a nice swift hit should do it. And now you have nicely, easily peeled garlic with no skins. So when you're chopping your garlic, you want to make sure you use a rocking motion, again, just like always. But the whole reason you want to do a rocking motion is you don't want to bruise it. You already just smashed it with your hand, so it's already a little crushed. So you want to make sure if there's any blemishes, you always want to take them off also. So just the whole process is, since you're crushing it, you want to make sure you use a rocking motion so you don't brown the garlic and bruise it. And you don't want to chop it again. You don't want to mash your garlic. You want to chop it, so you want to rock the knife properly. Now, the good thing about garlic is that it's very sweet. So when you saute it, it actually brings out the sugars, so it actually will sweeten up your dish. When you cook something like onions or garlic, there's a lot of sugars in them, especially in garlic. There's a lot of sugar. So when you cook it with the oil, it actually caramelizes it. So it actually brings out the sweetness in the sugars, kind of like when you're making a caramel. If you have granulated sugar, when you cook it, it turns into a deeper flavor, which is a caramel. Now remember, always rock your knife and keep your fingers on the tip so that it holds more stability. And now you can see how bright the garlic is when you're done. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to put the garlic on the side, and we're going to get our oil measured and get our pan hot. So now that our pan is hot, we're going to add our oil first. So when you pour your oil in, if you could see that it moves around nice and easy in the pan, that's how you know that it's ready to add your ingredients. So the first ingredient that we're going to add is our garlic. We're going to let it cook for a little bit to get a little caramelization, but not too long, because we're going to continue to cook it later. So we're going to put the bread in, and then we're going to get a nice coating throughout all the bread, so everything's evenly coated. Now, if you don't have a pan large enough to cook all of your breadcrumbs, another way that you can do it is you can bake it in the oven. You could toss your bread with your oil, salt, pepper, and garlic, then place it on a sheet tray, and you could bake it in the oven on 350 degrees until the bread is dried out. So you want to make sure that you move your bread around the pan so that everything gets coated with a little bit of olive oil, because if there's no oil on the bread, it's not going to get the nice crust and the caramelization that you're looking for. In this particular recipe, we're making this for our meatloaf and our macaroni and cheese. But if you were just making breadcrumbs, if you wanted to add more flavors, like dried Italian ingredients, or you could even add fresh ingredients like thyme, parsley, chives, or basil, it's just another way to add more flavor to it if you were going to be making a chicken cutlet or something like that. So now that our bread is fully cooked and all the moisture is cooked out, we're going to put it on the side so that it can cool before we grind it. And the reason you do this is you don't want to grind it when it's still hot, because then you're going to actually add steam to the Cuisinart when you're crushing it up and grinding it. And you don't want to add more moisture because you just took all the moisture out. All right, everybody. So now that we have our garlic croutons ready, we're going to turn them into breadcrumbs. So after we cook them with our olive oil, garlic, salt, and pepper, now we're going to be pureeing them and grinding them in our Cuisinart. So after your bread is cooled, we're going to put it into our Cuisinart. But the thing is, when you're grinding it, you don't want to put too much in at once. So make sure you just add a little bit at a time. It makes it a lot easier to work with. Now, after we pulsed our breadcrumbs to the proper coarseness that we're looking for, you could see the beautiful, beautiful colors that comes out. All right, everybody. So now what we're going to do is get our turkey meatloaf put together. So what we have in front of us is 2 pounds of ground turkey meat. And then we have our breadcrumbs, some salt and pepper, a little bit of Worcestershire, and some eggs. And then we're going to incorporate all these ingredients into our turkey. So what we're going to do first before we mix our meat is I'm going to put on a glove. Now you don't have to use a glove. I like to use one when I'm working with raw ingredients. But first we're going to do is add our breadcrumbs. Then we are going to add our salt and pepper, which is 1 part pepper to 8 parts salt, our Worcestershire, and then we're going to add our eggs. Now, when you're mixing, you want to make sure that you don't overmix the meat. So you want to incorporate everything evenly so that you don't have a glob of breadcrumb in one spot, but you really want to try your best not to do too much mixing. And the reason you do this is if you mix it too much, you're actually going to make the meat a little tough. And you won't know until later when you actually cook it that it's gotten tough. So just try to do the least amount of mixing, but incorporate everything evenly the best that you can. All right, everybody, so now that we have all of our ingredients mixed together, we're going to mold it and put it onto our sheet tray. So the thing is, when you're molding it, again, you want to try not to play with it too much because you don't want to overwork it. But the key is that you have to get it to be even thickness so that it'll cook evenly, because you don't want the middle to be raw and the edges to be burnt. So try to mold it to the best that you can so that it's nice and even thickness throughout. All right, so now that we molded our turkey meatloaf and we have our oven preheated to 375 degrees, we're going to be placing it in the oven for about 20 minutes. All right, so now that we've had our turkey meatloaf cooking for about 20 minutes, we're going to take it out and let it rest. All right, so now that what we're doing is we're going to pre-cook our pasta for our macaroni and cheese. So what I have here is my boiling water, and I'm going to add salt to season my water. Now, this is the only opportunity that you get to actually season your pasta. So you have to make sure you add salt to the water so it doesn't taste bland. All right, so now that we seasoned our water and we have it boiling, we're going to add our pasta and cook it for about 9 minutes. All right, everybody. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get our ingredients and mise en place ready for our bechamel sauce. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make a blonde roux, which is butter and flour, equal parts, and we're going to bring them together until it's a sandy mixture. So we're going to get a nice hard sear on our onion. And the reason we're going to do this is going to add more flavor and depth. So the reason that we're doing this is it's actually going to leave some char in the pan. So because of that, it's actually going to make, instead of a blonde roux, we're going to get more of a darker roux. So it's going to have more flavor. So now we're going to add our butter and our flour. And you'll see the butter's going to turn almost brown because the pan was hot. So that, again, also, the brown butter adds more flavor to our dish. So now we're going to make sure we're going to incorporate our flour. And when you're doing this, try to get as little clumps as you can. And you want to be almost like sand. So it should feel like wet sand after you mix all of your flour and your butter. Now we're going to season it with our salt and pepper mixture. And then add our milk and slowly incorporate it with our whisk. And whisk in as we're slowly adding it. When you're doing this, you don't want to add it all at once because then you're going to get more clumps. So the trick is just to slowly incorporate it so you can try and get rid of as many clumps as you can. Now you're going to strain it later, but the clumps are actually the thickening agent for your sauce. So you want to try and get everything to break down as much as you can. You want to make sure that your milk doesn't scald. So you want to bring it up to temperature, but you want to make sure that your milk doesn't scald. So keep it on about medium to medium high. Now, when you put your bay leaves, I always break them in half. The reason you do this is it incorporates more oils into the actual sauce. And now we're going to add our charred onion so that we could get all that nice flavor and sweetness that we got and let it incorporate nicely into the sauce. Now we're going to let all of it cook together, incorporate, and we will let it get nice and thick. You want to continually stir it. Just so you can make sure that all the flavors incorporate and nothing is sticking to the bottom of the pan and burning. Because we got that nice char before, so that adds that nice carbon flavor, but you don't want to burn the actual dish or scald the milk. You don't want to boil your milk. So as you're continuously stirring the sauce, you should start seeing the roux and the milk are incorporating to thicken your sauce. So now we're starting to let the sauce thicken up a little bit more, and it's getting to a nice thick texture, a nice silky smooth. Remember, continuously whisk and move everything around because you don't want the milk solids to sit on the bottom of the pan and burn. Now this is the thickness that we're looking for. Dip the spoon in and see if your sauce adheres to the back of the spoon. So now we're going to strain our sauce. Now you can use a chinois or a china cap, but if you're at home and you just have a regular strainer is just as good. So here I'm using a regular strainer, and I'm going to get a spoon or a ladle, and I'm going to work the sauce through the holes. So now I'm using a rubber spatula, and I'm working the sauce through. Now I don't want to mash it through because I don't want any of the clumps to go through. So just work it slowly around and make sure you get all the sauce out of it. And the reason you're doing this is in case there was any clumps of flour left over, they won't be in your sauce. Because the worst thing you want is to be making this wonderful, delicious sauce and then a clump of flour is in there. You take a big bite of flour. So we're just going to strain all the extra stuff out that we don't want. And get all the goodness. All right, so now we have to grate our cheese. Two cheeses that we're going to be working with today is going to be our sharp cheddar and our Gruyere. Right now, I'm going to use a box grater, but you can definitely use a mechanical machine like your Cuisinart, which has the attachments. Or you can also buy pre-grated cheese. But the difference is when you grate your own cheese, a fresh block, it definitely tastes better than the already grated stuff. So I would recommend using just a Cuisinart or something instead of a box grater if it makes it easier for you. Gruyere is really, really great cheese. It actually adds a really nice nuttiness, so it'll really bring out a lot of depth and flavor in the macaroni and cheese. All that hard work of grating that cheese will be worth it when you taste your cheese sauce later. So this is our aged sharp cheddar, and this is a really great, nice cheese. It's kind of traditional for macaroni cheese is cheddar, so I definitely recommend using it. You have to be careful of the brand that you use because some are a little cheaper in process and they have a little more oils in it. Now, the other cheese that we're going to be working with is our Gruyere, which is a really great French cheese. And if you get it imported from France, it really is great opposed to getting the domestic stuff. So now we're going to add our bechamel that we just made to our pot, and we're going to incorporate our cheese. So what we want to do first is just bring your bechamel up to temperature. So just stir it occasionally and make sure it comes up till it's a little bit warm. And then we're going to be adding our cheeses and mixing them to make our sauce. So now that we're incorporating our cheddar and Gruyere, we want to just make sure that we mix it so that everything gets melted evenly. And we have a nice, creamy sauce. And again, just like you were making your bechamel before, make sure you continuously stir everything. You don't want any of the cheese to stick to the bottom and start to burn. Also, when you're making this, you don't have to put it on high heat. Keep it on a medium to medium-low, and just continuously mix. Once the Mornay sauce heats up, all the cheese is going to melt it in really nice. See how all the cheese now is incorporating really nicely and coming together to make a nice silky texture. So now that everything is incorporated and everything is melted nice, we're going to pour in our pasta. So let's mix our pasta. And again, we cooked our pasta till al dente because we're going to bake it again. So you want to keep it a little bit undercooked just so you don't overcook it and make it mushy. All right, so now that we have our pasta cooked, we have our bechamel cooked, we added our cheese to make it into a Mornay sauce, and now we incorporated everything together. We are now going to pour it into our Pyrex pan, put our homemade breadcrumbs on top, and then we're going to bake them at 375 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, some people like to bake their pasta and some people don't. Right now, truthfully, you don't have to bake your macaroni and cheese. If you like it like this, nice and gloopy, you could actually just serve it just like that. Now that we've put our breadcrumbs on, we're going to put it into our 375-degree preheated oven. See you soon. Alright, so now that our macaroni and cheese has been in the oven for about 12 minutes, we're going to take it out and check that it is golden brown. Hi, how you doing? My name's Chef Hal, and this is Cooking with Hal. Today I'm going to give you a really great and easy cheddar chive biscuit recipe that you'll be able to make for all your family and friends. So the ingredients that we're going to need today are 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 6 tablespoons of frozen butter, 1/2 cup of cheddar cheese, 1 1/4 cups of heavy cream, and 1/2 cup of chopped chives. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you this is such an easy recipe, I'm just going to mix it for you right now. So what we do first is we're going to add all of our dry ingredients. Now you don't have to use a glove, but I'm going to use a glove. It makes it a lot easier for cleanup later. So first what we're going to do is we're going to add our 1½ cups of flour. Then we're going to add our 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and now we're going to mix. Now when you're mixing with this recipe, you just have to make almost a claw with your fingers, and you're just going to use your fingers to mix. You don't want to knead or anything. Just want to incorporate everything. Now we're going to add the cheddar cheese. Then our chives. Our frozen butter that we cut into large dices. And now we're going to add our heavy cream. Now remember, when you're mixing, make your fingers as a claw and just use them as stirrers. Just continuously stir. Don't knead it, just stir. Use just your fingers. Try and use your tips. And it all should come together. Now, once it starts getting a little bit more solidified and starts coming together more, then you can start to knead it a little bit more just to try and get all the sticky butter and everything to adhere to all the dry flour. Take all the excess dough off of your fingers and mix it in. After all your flour and cheese and everything is incorporated, this is what it should look like. Alright, so now that all of our ingredients are mixed, what we're going to do is we're going to portion out our dough for our biscuits. So I like to use an ice cream scoop, but if you don't have one, you're more than welcome to use a spoon. It's the same. I just prefer an ice cream scoop. Gives a nice larger size, and I find it a lot easier for scooping. So you want to get nice form. You don't want to mix it too much, and then we're just going to put it right on to the pan. Remember, try and get them to be about all the same size because you want them to cook evenly. But you don't have to mold them or mix them. Just scooping. So now we're going to place them in a 375-degree preheated oven for 16 minutes. Then we're going to turn around the pan for another 5 minutes. All right, let's get it in the oven. Alright, so now that our biscuits are done, we're going to turn them around in the oven. So what that means is, we're just going to take them out, we're going to turn the pan, and we're going to put them back in for another 5 minutes. Now the reason that you do this is that it actually lets all the heat distribute more evenly. So in case if the back is a little bit hotter than the front of the oven, it actually just lets it know that so everything cooks evenly so that it'll be crispy around all of the sides of the biscuits. Alright, so now our biscuits just popped, so that means it's time to take them out. So let's go check. Now we're just put them on a rack and let them cool. So what we're looking for to know that they're done is you're going to look for a nice golden brown crust around the edges. And you should have a nice golden brown crust on top. It should have a little softness. Enjoy. Right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really great string bean recipe that's super simple and it'll be really great for you to make for a nice side dish for a meal. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to show you how to clean your string beans. So the trick is what we're going to do is you have to pop off both sides. You want to take off the ends so that you have both sides crimped off. You can use a knife, but I like to prefer to use my fingers. Alright, so now that we've cleaned and picked all the ends off our string beans, we're going to cut them on a bias. So what that is a 45-degree angle. So we're going to take our string bean and we're going to cut it on a 45-degree angle using a rocking motion so that it looks like this. So now what you do is you take a couple of them and stack them together, and then you use a downward rocking motion and cut it on a bias. We're going to do the same again on these. 45-degree angle and cut it on a bias. So the string beans should look like this. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to slice our shallot for our string bean dish. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take off the ends. So you want to cut off the top and the core. I'm just do a quick score down the side so that the skin comes off nice and easy. Now, the thing about shallots are, this particular is one bulb, but sometimes they'll come in two bulbs, just so you know. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is show you how to slice the shallot. So what we do is we clean it and then we halved it. So now we're going to slice it. So what you want to do is use your thumb and your pinky to hold your product and use your 3 fingers to be a guide. And we're just going to rock our knife. Use a rocking motion. And you want to slice them so that they're all the same. So you want everything to be uniform so it cooks the same. And just rock your knife. Rock, rock, rock. Remember, keep your fingers tucked for safety. And then we have our sliced shallots. Alright, so first what we're going to do is we're going to add our fat. So that's, for this dish, is going to be our butter. Let's place our butter in the pan and let it melt. When our butter is about melted, we're going to add our shallots. And season with a little bit of salt and pepper. We're going to move everything around the pan. And then after you start to see a little bit of color around the edges, we're going to add our string beans. And then you're going to give a quick toss of everything so you can incorporate the butter all over the And when we're going to season one more time with a little bit of salt and pepper, because you just want to season in layers. Do one more mix. We're going to let cook for about 3 to 4 minutes. And then what we're going to do after we let cook for 3 to 4 minutes, we're going to put it on low heat and then let it cook for about another 5 to 10 minutes. On low and just continuously stir for a little bit until the rest of your ingredients are ready for your dish, and then we'll be eating. Alright, so now what we're going to do after we've been cooking, we start having some caramelization in our shallots. We're going to now turn it to low heat. So we put it on as low as it goes, and then now we're just going to let all the flavors meld together. And we're going to let the butter and the shallot and salt and pepper all absorb and get into the string beans so they'll be really rich. So now the string beans are done. They've been fully cooked, and now we're going to take them out and put them into a bowl so we can serve them. So I'm going to use a rubber spatula to get all the extra flavor from the pan into the serving dish. These are our sauteed string beans with caramelized shallots and fresh butter. Hope you enjoy. I hope everybody had a wonderful time cooking with us today. I am Chef Hal, and this is Cooking with Hal.